Hey everyone, God bless you. Thanks a lot for tuning in on this Tech Tuesday. Best wishes for your second week of the Great Fast. May it be blessed for your salvation. My reflection today, I'm entitling Tech Superficiality. Superficiality is something that we as serious Christians are trying to eliminate from our lives. We're trying to become more authentic, to put off airs, not to be hypocrites or wear masks, or trying to be transparent people. That task, which is common to all Christians, it's the call of Christ. That task has become very much harder through the use of tech these days, because tech itself is a massive promoter of superficiality, of masks, of hypocrisy. I'd like to begin this reflection by reading a portion of that magnificent 1978 Harvard commencement speech by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the famed author of the Gulag Archipelago. If you are young and you haven't grown up knowing about this Harvard commencement speech, you really should go onto YouTube and watch it. Solzhenitsyn's 1978 speech. I want to read you a portion where he addresses the subject of what's happening in the West and how this so-called information age, this technological age is turning us into these people with deep psychic distress in the area of both hastiness and superficiality. So listen to his words. He says, thus, we may see terrorists today described as heroes or secret matters pertaining to one nation's defense publicly revealed by the press, or we may witness shameless intrusion on the privacy of well-known people under the slogan, everyone is entitled to know everything. Is that not the great overarching umbrella of Google? Everyone is entitled to know everything. But this is a false slogan, characteristic of a false era. People also have the right not to know. And it's a much more valuable one. Listen to that. They have the right not to know, and it's more valuable. You know, many times someone will come and say, did you hear? And I'm like, I'd stop them and I'm like, no, I don't think so. And are you asking me, do I want to hear? Because the answer is no. Guarding your peace, refusing information that is not directly relevant to your station in life may be a very, very wise path, yes? People also have the right not to know, and it's a much more valuable one. The right not to have their divine souls stuffed with gossip, nonsense, and vain talk. A person who works and leads a meaningful life does not need this excessive, burdening flow of information. If you have a job and you're working with people, or you're a craftsman, you have meaning. You don't need to supplement the meaning in your life with some relentless flow of nonsense information. Hastiness and superficiality are the psychic diseases of the 20th century, he writes. And more than anywhere else, this disease is reflected in the press. Such as it is, however, the press has become the greatest power within the Western countries, more powerful than the legislative power, the executive power, and the judiciary. Can you imagine? He's writing this in 1978. Before Google and Facebook had launched their great endeavors to fill us with nonsense information and to launch their manipulative social experimentation plans that they've been executing, this massive social engineering project, obliterating free speech and manipulating the culture through their algorithms. He's writing this before this is even taking place. He saw what was happening and where it was going, that they would become more powerful than the government itself. And one would then like to ask, by what law has it been elected, and to whom is it responsible? In early democracies, as in the American democracy, at the time of its birth, all individual human rights were granted because man is God's creature. That is, freedom was given to the individual conditionally in the assumption of his constant religious responsibility. Such was the heritage of the preceding 1,000 years. 200 or even 50 years ago, it would have seemed quite impossible in America that an individual could be granted boundless freedom simply for the satisfaction of his instincts and whims. Subsequently, however, all such limitations were discarded everywhere in the West. A total liberation occurred from the moral heritage of Christian centuries with their great reserves of mercy and sacrifice. State systems were becoming increasingly and totally materialistic. The West ended up by truly enforcing human rights, sometimes even excessively. But man's sense of responsibility to God and society grew dimmer and dimmer. In past decades, the legalistically selfish aspect of the Western approach and thinking has reached its final dimension, and the world wound up in a harsh spiritual crisis and a political impasse. All the glorified technological achievements of progress, including the conquest of outer space, do not redeem the 20th century's moral poverty. Wow. What a text. What a text. The psychic diseases of the 20th century, promoted by this tech advancement that emphasizes undifferentiated access to information. What we're becoming. You know, I remember about maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I was at a priest conference. Every several years, we have continuing education for priests. In my world, it's called the Clergy Symposium. And we have lectures from accomplished priest scholars, and we hear beautiful things that nourish our souls. And then we break into groups. We have workshops, usually in the afternoons, in which we would go to a workshop on burial and how to minister to people at the time of death, or maybe marriage counseling. I was in a marriage workshop. And it was packed, maybe 50, 60 priests in this little room, 2 presenters giving their lecture. And when they came to open the floor to questions, one of our senior priests, who I think at the time was in his late 70s, he's now like 90 years old. One of our late priests raised his hand and said, "Brothers," he said, "I don't see how we're going to save any marriages from divorce if we don't address the subject of selfies." And I remember being completely taken aback. Here was this man who had, done exercise, 95% of his ministry before cell phones came into existence, and he was just aghast as a accomplished Christian pastor. He was just aghast at how cell phones were being used to take pictures of ourselves and to post them on the internet. And he saw it for what it was, this grotesque misuse of technology to foster incredible superficiality and especially narcissism. And he thought to himself and then shared with us that if this is the case, how will married couples learn to serve the other? How will they put the concerns of their spouse above the concerns of themselves, which is so basic to being able to persevere into the end in a marriage, if in fact it's all about me? And I spend my time thinking of how I can get a better picture of me that I can then promote to the world. He saw very clearly. Dear ones, beware of tech superficiality. I'll end my reflection by quoting the great Athonite father, Emilianos of Simenopetra, in a very famous article that he wrote on technology, in which he wrote this. He said, "Tech, when it is unrestrained and unbridled, becomes not the bearer of light, but rather of pitch darkness." unrestrained technological use will turn us into monsters. It will convey pitch darkness to our souls and hinder our path to salvation. May God preserve us from tech superficiality. God be with you.
And now, in what the researchers are calling the first study of its kind, Sinclair and his team were able to age the mice and then make them younger again. In this video shared by Harvard, these mice are the same age, yet one is visibly older. How did they do it? By literally breaking up the DNA, forcing the body to repair itself, which he says accelerates aging.
The mice actually do not just look old, but they literally are old by about 50%. They get great hair, they get wrinkled skin, they're old as old.
The results were shared at a conference earlier this year and are under review for publication. Covered how cells can be reprogrammed to be stem cells, which then can develop into cells of any type in the body. Using this method, Sinclair showed me how his team is trying to study memory loss by turning skin cells into tiny brains.
Here they are, these little beauties. So these are mini human brains we've old by about 50%. They get great hair, they get wrinkled skin, they're old as old.
The results were shared at a conference earlier this year and are under review for publication. Covered how cells can be reprogrammed to be stem cells,